Welcome to Business Cake. This is a podcast where we discuss creativity, work, ideas, and we hear stories from a variety of guests, builders, and founders. In the episode today, we are going to reflect. We're going to recap some of the conversations we've had with previous guests and chop it up with Tim Heath. If you listen to this episode and you have not heard the other ones, that's fine. That's the point of this. We want to value the people who have shared their stories with us and give you an on-ramp to say, you know what, I want to go back and listen to some of these other ones. So thanks for joining us. Let's go. Tim, you were like, let's go. I'm ready.
Like, hey, y'all must be having some great conversation. I don't know what the pre-conversation was going to be, but y'all must have been deep into it.
What ended up happening? What made the difference for you?
I had to close down my browser and rejoin.
Okay. So,
it worked, and it was pretty quick.
Can you guys hear me okay?
You sound great, Tim. You look great.
It's a good thing. I got a face for radio, right? That's what they say.
All right. Well, look, first of all, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Tim.
I know you had to, even though it was 1.25 speed, you still had to go through all the episodes and listen to them. And I don't know if you took notes, but you might have.
I did.
But that's extra work. And thanks, dude. Kind of what we are thinking. Will, you want to jump into the overall?
So this is a recap pod. We've obviously never done a recap pod before. So this is the inaugural. This is the inaugural. We'll figure it out.
Yep.
Kind of the intent behind it is we're having these conversations with various people, builders, founders, owners, creatives, etc. And there's a lot talked about, but we don't really get to break it down. And we also want to give the opportunity to highlight it. So if people just listen to this episode, they can then say, you know what, I want to go listen to the Dillon Simpson, something about that caught me. So we want to just shine a light on that. I think how I'll see this going. So Tim, you've listened to the episodes. You've taken notes. Patch and I experienced them.
Right.
But then Patrick, so you're going to bring some of this content. You'll help spark. Patrick is going to talk about the feel of it and the vibe. He's our vibe guy.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm like, timer. Hey, guys, we got to keep this moving. Interesting part.
Get bogged down.
Yep. Yeah, no, I'll jump in, and I'll be in there as well. But I think if we
moderate it or host it, Will, kind of.
Yeah,
that's good.
We'll see how it goes.
Well, I love this idea. I think it's a great, because how many podcasts do you listen to over the years, and you're like, man, I had some great, we each are probably going to have our own takeaways, and can co-create some takeaways.
Yeah.
That I think is exciting, right?
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because the whole point of talking to people is getting their story, and getting them. And so if we just jump over and like, great, we did that, let's move on. It just to revalue like who this person is. They took the time to spend time with us and to tell their story, and let's not just let it fall by the wayside. So that's kind of my thought.
Yeah. I love it.
So we're going to dive in. What I'll do is do a brief, I'm talking a couple of words, maybe to a couple of sentences, brief intro. And then we can just dive in. We'll have roughly 8 to 10 minutes for each. And we'll go from there. If we have time at the end, we can talk about some of the stuff Patch and I had updated on, but we'll see.
Are we including
this
Tim's
business
in
cake
this?
as we go. This may be a two-parter recap.
Okay.
Where you can certainly recap my podcasts with another guest.
No, I just knew that we were going because yours just came out. If we wanted to say this is like the last 4
Yeah,
or
let's
5.
save
I
that
don't
one for
remember.
next one. Let's save that one for the next recap pod.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So first, we're going to kick off this business cake recap with Jaime Fernandez Sr. Jaime, international entrepreneur, works in the area of business Seinfeld popularized called imports exports, and also created over the span of 13 years his own organic fertilizer from cactus. It was a great, fun conversation. He is my father-in-law, and he lives right next to me.
I love
that.
I love that when you asked him if he could marry his daughter, he said, "Have you talked to her about that?" I thought that was great. I thought that was great. I imagine that spoke to probably a bit of their relationship and the way he raised his kids. It seemed like
it did. I think it's also specific to him and Maria, where he's like, at that point, I think Maria was probably 18, 19, and he was very clear that she's not going to even take my permission to do something or not.
So I guess y'all got married young then.
We did, yeah.
I didn't realize. So y'all got married around, did you, how old were y'all?
Maria was 22, I think. I was 23.
Okay. So there was
20. It was 2011, I think, the year, right? Well,
yeah,
April 2011.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I liked about Jaime is his breadth, the breadth of what he's done and who he's connected with and the different things that he's interested in. The constant reinvention where he's not even like necessarily doing the same thing in each industry, but his curiosity or just like the genuine way that he engages something new and is 100% in. And it's not like normal stuff that the rest of us would do. Like I worked at Sprint and Starbucks. He's like fertilizer from cactuses and trying to pull air out of the atmosphere,
Right. Yeah. Moisture from, right. Like water from the moisture in the air is incredible. I think I love that point, Patch, that, was it getting back down to the reason of his work seemed to be his passion to improve environments, right? People's lives.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about his work improving the life of those that are essentially at the foundation of the economic, spectrum. Those creating the natural resources that fuel the really the economy, right? Through farming and capturing and implementing. How do we better do those things?
It's a big thing for him, and if in any conversation with him, I probably hear once a week, he just talks about getting back to the basics.
Yeah.
He's like, we need to get back to the basics. I need to get back to the basics. As a culture, we need to, and just the environment's big for him and taking care of it, learning how to work with it, create from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one takeaway maybe from some of the ideas that he shared seems to line up with some challenges that builders face, as in, finding a passion and doing what you love. And yet it's not, the challenge can be, it's not just about even doing what you love, but there is monetary effects to it, right? Or results from that. And he talked about the challenge, some of the challenges that he faced, bringing a passion like that of working and helping people to the marketplace, and the fact that there are places in the marketplace where it's all about the bottom line, more emphasis on the bottom line per se than the people that are involved with it and their well-being.
Well, and that's where I feel like you can kind of go as a builder goes throughout their journey. right? It's like some people like will, our cousin that we talked to, profit minded. Like he focuses on profit and that's his goal. And then you have Jaime, who like you couldn't make him care about profit. Like no matter what you do, profit is not even on his radar.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then for me in my journey, I feel like there are times where that's all that I care about, and then times where I don't care about it at all. But it's usually like I'm moving in between those things to find out, like, I don't know if it's per day or per project or for whatever it is, where I'm kind of trying to, all right, what needs to happen here? Is it for the person? Is it for the profit? Because here's the thing, like, I love what Jaime said, and he is the best person, the best kind of person, and like, if other people that had billions of dollars were like him, what kind of world would this be, right? Even though they wouldn't probably have the billions if they. But the point is, like, how do you make that decision, and like, what grid are you using to go through that, and at what point in time do you decide? Because you can't do good without profit. There's one guy that we talked to named Dave Dawson in Ohio who's done well with running medical facilities and selling them, and he said, make all the money that you can, because you can do more good with more money.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like, okay, what does it take to make the money, right? Is that the question that we all need to wrestle with, right? What are the stakes? Is there a negative, or is there, what happens to the people along the way?
Right. Yeah. The people. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the how.
The how.
It's like, sure, making money, do it or don't, but how you go about that matters quite a bit. For some, I think, I personally, I think it matters a lot. But for a lot of people, it doesn't matter. It's like the ends are going to justify the means. Like, what is it that I'm going for? I'm going to go do that.
Yeah, and I didn't, just to, I think, speak to this side of things for the listeners, and maybe they have or have not, listened to Jaime's stories and what he was sharing, but I didn't hear from him. I didn't take away that he ever thought profit was anything negative either, right? It was that he was coming up against forces in the work that he's trying to do at those levels with the farmers and the means of producing really good crops efficiently. And
Right.
not the expert there, but it was, he had a passion for helping the people do that really, really well.
Right.
And his focus was not doing that to make a ton of money.
Right.
It was to do the right thing.
Right. There was, I don't know if this was covered in the episode. I don't remember if this was just back conversation, but at one point he's talking about selling something, I think, for $25.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that rings a bell. I think that's in there. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what do your competitors sell? Something like 300, 400 or something.
Yeah, some crazy multiple.
Right. And his viewpoint on it is absolutely right. Like, that's probably slightly extortionist, where it's like, now you're hindering them growing food for people, and it's like, the ones charging 400 eat food, like, you need this. So, but there's got to be some play between the 25 and 400 that maybe we can meet in the middle, or something like that. But yeah. I do appreciate that about him. And I love that those people are out there that can call us back to the values that really matter for people and really matter in business.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I agree 100%. You know what? I think y'all asked him about, in all your conversations, y'all talk about, generational kind of thought processes and general wealth, thought processes. And what I loved about what he said was, do what find your passion and do that. The money will be there. I love that thought process. The money will come. Do what you're passionate about.
That's good.
Because I think there's some level of that somehow, whether it's nurture or nature or some combination of that, is each of us are going to have a passion about something, right? And everybody's probably not going to have the same passion about, whatever that is. And perhaps that's some strength in the builders of the world, that there's a passion given to each one of us in a special way to bring that to fruition. And while we're here on this, God's earth.
Yeah, and our contribution is specific, and we find that through our passion. I think the last thing we can say about him, I mean, we can keep talking about Jaime, but his willingness to just be open-handed to give, like connections. Like I've experienced connections that he's made where he's just like, hey, you can help this person. And then we never hear from Jaime again, because he's like, he didn't do it for him. He did it for us and for that person. And just I think that is something that people need to keep in mind. Like, if you give, it will be given to you. So feel free to give because it'll come back. And he's that kind of guy.
Yeah, I love that. Can I have one more thing that I had written down that I think is pretty awesome, or at least stuck out to me, was I think y'all asked about kind of who he found inspiration from. And he pretty, I'm not going to I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically the idea was anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Anybody that I can learn from, I want to learn from. And that attitude of humility to go through life constantly looking, who can I learn from?
That's good.
It kind of goes back to take the best and leave the rest, right? I feel like our sometimes in our generation it can be, all or none type approach, where I think the take the best and leave the rest is probably a good idea to consider.
Well, and that everyone has something to give too. It's not just the best in the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you better move us on. This is your only chance, Will, and you better unmute or we're not going to be able to hear you.
I've been trying to take this thing back for the past 5 minutes.
Why are you muted?
The mute button is unfazed.
Andrew Thompson. Andrew is a creative, and he's very creative. He's a designer in Birmingham, Alabama. He's a funny guy. And one of the businesses he runs is called A Studio. And he creates some merch, but he also does some client work. All right. Over to you guys. Vibe guy, content guy, what do we got?
What I liked about what Andrew's shared, one thing that stood out to me was your fun and your hobbies, and how does that integrate into your career. I think he talked about his creative process and creating something that's fun, or kind of building on the passion commentary that Jaime even had, or Jaime, right?
You got it.
Yeah. We won't edit that.
Yeah, cut that out. But yeah, paying attention to what do you have fun doing, and can you provide value to others in doing that? Mm-hmm. Doing those things.
Andrew because he kind of was on a journey of stepping into that passion. It wasn't like he said, I'm super passionate about this, and immediately just threw everything he was into it. It was probably a really wise way of doing work, discovering the passion, and then as your passion grows, then there reaches this point where you say, I gotta jump.
Yeah.
That's the moment where I need to do this for it to grow more. So it was good.
Yeah, and Andrew's like a good mix of creative and then also, common sense. Not that creative isn't common sense, but actually having to have your feet in the real world. And he's always been like that. We've known him for a long time, and like he thinks about things for a long time, and then he'll make a decision, and it's usually a very responsible decision. One thing that I love about him though is like that mistake that he made with the barcode, which he it kind of wasn't his fault, like he did
happened
everything.
To anybody. That could have happened to anyone.
Yeah. Well, and they went ahead and produced it, but his attitude, like I could see his face with his eyes where he's just like, oh no, what did I do? But his response is to kind of laugh at it. Uh-huh. It's like, oh, well, I don't know if I can. Yeah, I mean, at that point, you can't do anything. And I know a lot of our responses isn't. I was listening to Federer talk about tennis, and he just said he won 80% of his games in tennis, but he only won 54% of the points. And his point was that you focus on the point, and once the point's over, it's in the past, you forget it, and you go on to the next one. And that point's important. And so you're never like worried about the point you're not playing, whether it's behind you or in front of you. And that way you can give 100% into it. And I kind of feel like Andrew has that sense where he just is like, he had done it already. It's at the grocery store printed on these beer cans or whatever it is. And then the funny thing is, it works out. Like COVID hits, and the grocery store is like, yeah, it's no problem. We'll take care of it because everybody wants beer. And I think that's what's awesome about Andrew is just like, how does it work out for this guy like that? Yeah. And until you take the risk, like jump out and try to start your own company and make this kind of stuff or whatever, it's going to be like, it's not going to be in your favor. But once you do, you'll find favor along the way.
Yeah, that was such a great story. And to be able to keep moving forward, right? So like that short-term memory of going through life, what's in the past, it's in the past.
Yeah.
We cannot do anything about what's in the past. One thing that stood out to me when, some of the concepts of what he was talking about was, he was faithful to somebody else's work. He was working for that. He was in that job. It wasn't what he was like super, necessarily even excited about doing ultimately, but he shared some really insightful, I think, wisdom about career paths in that, he kind of realized, okay, the company I'm working for, if he felt kind of trapped, but the company I'm working for took the risk on hiring me, and so they get to reap those rewards of taking those risks. And if anybody's feeling like they're stuck in a position, maybe it's an opportunity to think about that, right? And a career position is to say, okay, am I just wanting more for what I'm doing, or is this an opportunity to branch out and spread my wings and build something myself?
He also mentioned being able to look at a puzzle of pieces that are just all over the table and be able to know this piece goes here. I was talking with Maria. She listened to it, and I said, "What? Isn't that an incredible talent?" She goes, "Well, I can do that." Yeah, I know it's an incredible talent.
It's still an incredible talent.
Yeah.
But he also talked about constraints and the importance of that. Like, it's not the more constraints you give yourself, but when you are working within a set of constraints, how that can spark or unleash more creativity than if you just say, "Hey, anything goes." It's like it's hard to know where to start. So.
And the other thing about Andrew as a person that is really unassuming, like you would never expect this. We were with him in October in Birmingham, and we got to spend kind of, Saturday. It was Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, or something like that. And we went to a music festival. We went to a coffee shop, to a bike shop. We kind of were just around town with him in different things. And I want to say everywhere we went, it's probably a slight exaggeration, but it's not an extreme exaggeration. Everywhere we went, people would say hello to Andrew, and he would also point out things like, "Yeah, I designed that. I designed that." And it's like the dude is just so well connected in all these things, and it just kind of, and that's kind of a testament to his character, his integrity, his likability, and then his ability to design different things from like a counseling trailer to a beer can. So anyways, good job, Andrew. We like you.
Andrew's awesome.
All right. Dillon Simpson. Dillon has run an electrical company out of Gulf Shores called Simpson Electrical for the past 7 years. He's somebody we all know and love. Give it up for Dillon.
He is our main listener as well. Number one.
Dillon matters. That's just Dillon. Dillon, you matter, brother. You matter. Along with everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Which
just like everyone else.
I'd forgotten about that book, and I'm glad that he brought it up because it's probably something that I'm going to go back through and listen to again around building a company and going back to the people, right? The people that you live your life with.
What was the name of the book? Sorry.
The book was titled Everybody Matters.
Everybody Matters.
And
Bob Chapman.
Yep. So yeah, Bob Chapman went on. The premise was, it's not profits over people in every situation, right? It's how do we, businesses, how can businesses operate in such a way to not only bring value to, maybe the economy as a whole, but also honoring the people that are working for that company along the way to help actually do that, right? And helping them, are the employees of a company benefiting or valued, right? Valued as much as maybe the consumers of that business are valued. And that's just a great, we could unpack that probably on its own in an entire podcast.
Yeah, it goes back to kind of what we were talking about with Jaime with that. And I think, we probably attract those kind of people because I think we care about that, the values. And I think it'd be great to interview some people that maybe that's not the core of who they are. But Dillon is definitely that. And I think you see it. I really appreciated it in the way that he's built his company. He's always a practitioner and a tinkerer where he's watching and paying attention to the way things happen. And so for example, the relationship with that guy who he took the loss on, and he went through this really difficult Mobile County situation. And then eventually it worked out, but it's like Dillon wasn't just doing that on a whim. He knew it was a calculated risk on I'm going to do this. And every time I talk to him, he has something that he's talking about with his company where he's like, well, this is, and it doesn't change necessarily weekly because we talk maybe 4 or 5 times a year. But he focuses on something and he's working on it and building it. And I appreciate that about, anyone in their craft, whatever it would be.
Yeah, it was amazing to hear kind of his career path towards running his own business and building that. But he could look back and see, what I was building this skill set in that job that helped me in my next job, and I added another skill set, another job, and he just kept on building his own skill sets and capabilities, and it seems like he can bring all that to bear now in his business. But I think that's a great thing to be reminded of is have awareness for, what am I learning in this experience that I can take for future growth or to benefit somebody else, right?
Yeah.
To better ourselves and our skill sets for others.
Cool. He also gets sandwiches from Publix.
Oh, yes. And I will second what he said about amazing sandwiches, amazing sub sandwiches.
Really?
And be prepared to go shop and come back in an hour or two.
I have never had a Publix sandwich. I mean, it's just, and I love a good sandwich. I know I said this on the pod, but I mean, all right, I'll have to try. I will take that as homework.
Where you are, Will. It's a little different.
But they don't make sandwiches for you. Like Publix, when
but
we were in Atlanta,
3009 has
the holidays.
A barbecue restaurant, bro. It's more than a sandwich.
Look, they've got barbecue restaurant. They have one with tacos, another one with pizza, and all of those are great.
But you want a sandwich?
It would be nice. All right. Elizabeth Faurso. And Elizabeth is super fun. I'm going to save my commentary till after the intro. 20 years of making places that matter. That's kind of how she defines what she does. One of the flagship areas is here in San Antonio, where she took a defunct brewery and made it into a world-class neighborhood. It's got, restaurants and retail and hotel, Michelin rewarded and starred and keyed. So that was fun to be able to have her on. But Tim, what stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I loved hearing her story. Obviously, being on the east side of the country, I haven't had a chance to visit any of her spaces in Texas and other places, but just the awesome idea of her going into an area. What it sounded like, whether it be a restaurant or a brewery or a hotel or a space where people are going to congregate or experience and be able to, understand what's the vision, right? And go into the experience of when they walk in the front door, they come on site, on property. What are they experiencing in the flow of that? All of that fascinates me because I am not skilled in those areas. So I really, really enjoyed hearing, her tell some of that story of how she arrived at building those spaces and the process she goes with, to co-create with her clients, the end result, and having to stay disciplined to that, which that really stood out to me, of staying disciplined toward a vision or disciplined in the midst of the creativity and the,
right.
All of that is what's the vision and how do we create disciplined action towards, that experience, whatever that's going to be. Because I think in creativity, right? Creativity can be such a, I think at least, from my standpoint, being creative can go so many different ways, and it can be undisciplined, right? It can be too spontaneous per se.
And a lot of people might not associate creativity with discipline, but she did. I think some of how she brought that up was around the organizing principles and how it's like, yeah, we can go do whatever we want, but how do we do it in a way that ties back to this principle that we said matters? And then let's do that intentionally and thoughtfully. It's kind of the constraint conversation. It's just a centered constraint. Patch, what vibes were you getting?
Elizabeth was awesome because she was so different than anyone that we've had on so far. And I think anytime you have Elizabeth on any podcast, that person, the host, is going to say that, she's just cut from a different cloth. And there's several things that I took away from things that she said, but her genuine curiosity about stories like you're talking about, and where she, when Will, you asked her, like, what do you do for fun? She was like, my life, like everything I do is fun. Like, what do you mean take time off? Like, this is all enjoyable. So that's just cool that she structured her life like that. And the story I told about my son and the little store he created, when she was like, yeah, that's the creation of a false economy. And, so there's just little nuggets that she's put in there that I'd like to pull out. And also, like, she has this really cool optimism, I think. I don't know if that's really the best way to say it. I feel like that's not actually the best way to say it. It's more like finding the best parts about what she runs into. Because, like, if you look at her childhood and where she came from and the moving around, and then she was like, what do you mean? It was awesome that we moved around, and some people are like, well, it was terrible because I left all my friends, but for her, she's like, no, I wouldn't have had this chance or had the opportunity to do this. And then stumbling into a small town in Texas or whatever, and she wants
Wisconsin.
To know the story. Oh, I mean, I'm no.
Yeah. You're talking about road trips. Yeah.
I mean, you could, sure. Wisconsin too. Like, I think for her, she's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, put it on there because there's going to be something fun. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I admire that, because for me, I'd be like, that small town does not look interesting to me. Like,
how can I get out of here? Right. Well, what's the fastest?
Right. Like, I don't know anything about it. Like, I'm just going to move on.
It had a story, and its story ended.
Really, no one cared about that story enough. No, I'm just kidding. Because I think she would go in, and
she would find it. Yeah.
She would find the joy. And what's funny about the things that she said is, right now, Will and I are working on. Will Curry and I are working on possibly helping launch another coffee shop. And so this framework that she talks about with finding a story and how she did Hotel Emma, which has 2 Michelin keys, and how she did that, it was just so quality and so deep and right on. And so it's like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to do it that well, but I think going with that idea will send us in the right direction.
Yeah. Another thing, just as y'all are talking, that I realized I love about it. So when she was a kid and they went to that small college town in the Midwest, and they're, her parents professors and musician, and bringing in the transcendental meditation community, watching the collision of that, I think, and seeing how it revived that town. It brought in new economic possibilities. It brought in community in another way. It brought in, it just took this to a new place. And I think that's the goal of improv, or that's the goal of economic development, where you're able to not push out diversity, but you're able to say, hey, what are we working in? How do we integrate this stuff to make something better? And Patrick, think a lot about build and the work that we are doing more and more there. It's like that would be the dream, right? That you're able to help stimulate economy and development and take a place to a whole new level. But she's experienced that, and then she's kind of done it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. She has done it, not kind
successfully. Yeah.
So yeah,
I did buy the book that she recommended, How Big Things Get Done. And it's really interesting. I'm only a chapter into it right now, but they are talking about multi-billion-dollar to trillion-dollar projects. That book is not about redoing your backyard. I think he brings it down into there, but the guy who wrote it, his experience is at a different level. So I will report back on that later.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I need to go check it out. Surely there's some great insight in there. I'm sure that could be utilized. However big a project is or small. Something that, going back to what the question about, hey, what do you do in your downtime or for fun, or when you're quote unquote not working. I got the again, kind of going back to a lot of people, there might be people move through life or some type of mindset of either or. And, I'm working right now, so I'm not having fun, to I'm going to go have fun. So, and i.e. that means not working, it's really the integration of our passions and the things that we care about with the work that we do, providing value to others, and I think she mentioned she would just drive and listen to music and, that kind of thing. But I got the idea that stimulated her creativity for taking that back to Monday through Friday or whatever project she was working on.
Okay.
And I was like, man, that's great for, what can we do? It's almost like that active listening idea is, we're actively waiting even, you just because you're waiting on something to come to fruition doesn't mean you sit there and do nothing. But it's that, hey, I'm gonna take time, strategically to kind of reset or gather skills in my downtime or free time, and then figure out a way how does that bridge the gap into providing value for others.
Mm-hmm. I think clarifying what it is that you enjoy is helpful. So, for instance, one of the things that I've found that I enjoy is solving problems for people. I love that. Mm-hmm. And so there are times
you're
where
good at it. You're great
at that. Thanks, Tim. Yeah. Brought to you by Patrick. There are times where I've found myself in a situation where I'm solving problems I don't like for people I don't like, in a place I don't like, and it's like
work. That sounds like work.
Well, I think the difference
in the worst sense.
If I can see it as solving problems for people, and keep it framed properly. Like, we're all going to be at different times. Like, you don't get to choose everything about your life. You're going to take on a client. You're like, man, I don't like the way that this happened, or whatever the case may be. And so I think it's just keeping the framework, and she did a good job of that. I feel like, Dillon, was talking about that, and he enjoyed the electrical work and serving people. And so he kind of kept that too. And so, if you're always like, well, it has to be around in this place, this kind of problem, then you're probably not going to enjoy it, because you're only going to do that 1 out of 25 times or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's a great point of, framing the work that we do to understand that it's not always going to be our quote unquote ideal. But there's value in that approach of saying, you know what, this is about serving others. This is about, not about me. I'm going to look, this is me, sacrificing or putting my wishes behind somebody else's, right? But
Sure. Yeah.
not thinking of myself less, but thinking of others more.
Yeah.
Or thinking less of myself and thinking more of others.
Say it in a different way.
I think that's all I got. Maybe somebody else can come up with it.
That was good. What were you saying, Patrick?
Well, I was just going to kind of reemphasize the idea that, Elizabeth enjoyed the creativity. When we asked her that question, she didn't necessarily say, well, these projects I like and these I don't. For her, it's about, I get to have the creativity to find stories and co-create, or whatever, I don't know how she would exactly say that, but I would encourage people to find what it is that you enjoy, and then do that in whatever setting you find yourself in. Does that make sense? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take that for what it's worth.
It's good. It's good stuff.
Thanks.
Tim, did you listen to the episodes where it was just Patrick and me?
Yes, I did.
And in your estimation, why were those not as good as the ones with the guests?
Hey, that's your words in my mouth.
Oh,
is that leading?
You know what? Well, 1,000%. 1,000%.
Get out.
Disagree with you. They were awesome. No, it's great to hear. It's great to hear kind of updates from the hosts, right? And some great takeaways. From those conversations were, really life is real, and from the challenges of exiting, an employment that you had, Will, and thinking about stepping out and starting something with you and Maria and Etla, distilleries and everything there. Going back to even what Patrick shared about, even running a business that, is not, it's not easy, right? And there's challenges there. And how do we build a culture and maybe at some point there's an exit opportunity, and because it ran its course, right? I think, Pat, you said, you shared that thought about the end of a thing is better than its beginning. There's a lot of wisdom in going through life with that understanding, because I think there's certain times in life when situations, whether they're frankly relationships or business opportunities or a company that's being built and then sold or shut down, there's things in life where something begins and then it ends,
Yeah.
I love when my workout ends in the morning. Like, that's awesome. I don't love when it starts, right? And even at the end of a day, right? The end of a day is kind of a great thing sometimes.
Yeah.
You're like, man, my day is over and I get to go rest, right? I think there's wisdom in keeping that mindset through life knowing that it's fine. There are certain things that are finite. They're not going to go on forever. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? That could build into something new.
Yeah. I don't know if we have anything to visit within those. I mean, I think for me, it's nice to give updates, to hear Patrick's thoughts and challenges, especially as we're having more and more of these conversations with people that are in the arena also building. It's kind of I feel like I'm learning all the time right now. And some of that's comfortable and some of that is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, challenging, right? Expanding.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I'm interested in longer term, like with this podcast in particular, is when we check in with somebody and we hear like what they're facing, where they are. For instance, Dillon was talking about, Will, you asked him the question, where you want to be in 5 years. He was like, I hate that question. And you were like, answer it. And then answer 10 years or something like that.
I think I took it to 30.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. You did not let him off the hook.
No.
But what if in a couple of years, he's got 5 trucks,
Yeah.
And obviously we can't take full responsibility for that. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just the progress that he's going to make over time.
Yeah.
You can't stop. Like James Clear had a thought that he shared recently where he just said consistency isn't what we think it is. Consistency is showing up every day. We think consistency is working out 5 days a week for an hour, doing a full set, 3 reps, 10, etc. I don't work out, so I don't know what happens when people go in the gym. But he said it's not. It's getting to the gym. And if you're there for 5 minutes, go home if that's what you can do today. So consistency is more about showing up every day. And I think when we give ourselves permission, like the Navy SEALs are going to hate this when they listen to this podcast. They're going to be like, that is the worst advice ever. But I think honestly, with the people that are in the arena that are like us, just don't give up. Every day show up. And what does that look like for you to show up today? And so as we check in with people over time and see that progress from thing to thing to thing and how they're doing, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I think that speaks to, building on that is, the short memory, right? Because sometimes people don't show up because last time they did, it didn't go exactly as they thought it would, or they weren't as successful as they thought they would be. And so they look at that as failure rather than saying, you know what, I showed up. Mm-hmm. Rather than building on that, I showed up. They're like, man, well, look at all these things that went wrong. Why would I even try? Why would I even go back to the gym? I was only there for 5 minutes. Why waste my time even going there? But The fact of the matter is they're more likely to work out once they're there than not going at all. Right. So I think showing that's so awesome. And so applicable in our everyday life to be aware of what am I afraid of showing up to or for, right? Or where is that challenging me to stay consistent?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
That is.
What else you got for us, Will?
I have the words free for all written down. I think that's it on the recapping, which was great. I mean, I think we hit the highlights or some highlights within them. We'll probably cut it a little before this.
What's on the horizon? What's on the horizon for Business Cake?
For Business Cake,
what are y'all excited?
This Friday, we've got an interview with a couple who she really is the one who's driving it, but it's a marketing firm and they're in Colorado. And then we've been trying to get Gino the Bahamian, but he ghosted me. So hopefully he'll respond at some point. Remember that taxi driver, that bartender that we had?
Yes. That would be awesome.
Yeah, so we've got some interviews coming up, but then did you want to say something, Will?
Yeah, we have those two. There's a couple others like
simmering.
Yeah, that we need to
Can't
talk
spoil
about.
it. Yeah.
But there will be fun. They're very different. So,
But the other thing that Build
about.
is doing, because Build is kind of the parent of Business Cake, is there is a neighborhood development going in about 30 minutes from my house, and they are putting in a restaurant, a brew pub, a bookstore, and they want a coffee shop.
Mm.
So they approached us and said, "Hey, can you guys do this?" And so
wow.
Will and I are meeting with them in a week and a half to give them a proposal, basically, I think, of what it would look like for us to co-create this with them and with the community that's there. And so that's really interesting because we could talk about that for a long time because there's so many different pieces that go with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is something that we are looking to do, is how do we come into a situation and help? I mean, it's consulting, right? But it also is co-creating, where we're rolling up our sleeves and getting dirty to help something grow.
Because we're also, you're going to be a boots on the ground operating.
Either 5 o'clock every morning.
This is Chin Chin extension or brand new.
Well, see, that's what I mean. We just dive down. We could talk about this for an hour, but no, it's not. They're going to be a client of Chin Chin, but talking about a coffee shop, it needs to be the fabric of that community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's got to be different. There's no way it could be Chin Chin, so.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. That's exciting.
That's on the horizon. We'll tell you more later as we know more.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we find out more. Okay. Teaser.
Well, at some point we should do a podcast on mezcal. Drinks, how to make it.
Dude. Fuck yeah. This is an explicit podcast.
We earn it once every 7 episodes when Will says the F word. Although I have looked it up.
1,000%.
If somebody talks about drugs or suicide or violence or serious mental health, all of that is covered in explicit. So it's okay. That's why we have explicit, so people can be like, well, I thought about killing myself. It's like, well, I'm glad you didn't.
Right. Yeah.
But we don't have to change the rating.
You don't want to not have the identifier on there.
Right. Well, yeah, let's do that. Let's put you on the docket, Will, and then Tim and I will interview you.
Yeah. Because I don't really know anything about mezcal. I don't know what drinks to make. I don't know. We should do maybe even you could do, obviously we'd have to talk through it, but you could talk about some drinks and things like that you make and that are good to good ways to enjoy. Yeah. Mezcal.
I will do it. I'm going to bring Maria with me and we'll do a joint.
Yeah. Would you call it mezcal though, right? Mezcal.
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 Yes. All right. We'll schedule that. We'll put it down.
Mezcal.
Because I bought some mezcal.
Okay.
Mezcal.
I need some.
And you didn't like it.
Mezcal. I think I'm missing something. I'm definitely not doing it correctly. So
well, just real quick. We need to diagnose it. What do you know the name brand? Do you know what you bought?
I think I Googled really popular mezcals or really good mezcal. And so I don't know, I think I tried to do a mezcal old fashioned possibly. Okay. And it hinted at medicinal flavoring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Tasted too much like medicine versus
a drink,
a refreshing or nice, enjoyable beverage.
This past Sunday, I was in California and I bought a bottle of Dos Jovenes, I think it is, or Dos Hombres. That's what it is, the Joven variety of Dos Hombres.
Okay.
And we took a bottle of Squirt, which you could do something else, and put that together.
Oh, it's great.
It was delicious and refreshing.
Citrus is going to be very good with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So I've got a whole bottle in my liquor cabinet that I need to figure out how to enjoy.
We finished the bottle that night, so there's nothing left.
Nice.
I'll send you some Rex.
Okay, and I'll take a picture of the bottle and send it to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's put it on for an Ella feature.
Okay.
Sweet.
We'll do it. I need to lay out the schedule anyway, so we'll work on that.
Do you want should I send anybody y'all's way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay.
Oh,
Right.
we should have mentioned our nomination form on our website where people can go in and nominate other guests.
It's not too late. Let's mention it.
Hey, if you know somebody that should be on Business Cake, they're doing something and it's exciting and inspiring and other people need to know their story, just go to build.network, BILD.network, and fill out the nomination form and let us know, and we will follow up with them and get them on this pod.
Business Cake is produced by Sound Ops. The music is written by Philip Cusius, and this is hosted by Will and Patrick. If you enjoyed it, please rate us 5 stars wherever you find your podcasts.